I record.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right. So hi everybody. I'm Amy Loudermilk. I'm the new program manager for Arts Build. And today we are joined by Connie Fernandez and Jeremy Burrows of Skye Strategies for one of our first webinars, one of our first series of monthly webinars that Arts Build is going to be putting on for our organizations in support of shared services. So support services like what Skye Strategies bring on in terms of today is fundraising. And working with your board of directors. So with that, I will leave it to Connie and Jeremy to give us a good talk today.
Sure. So my name is Connie Fernandez, and I want to first thank Arts Build for connecting all of us today and allowing us to be a resource for you guys. So thank you for attending. Just to give you a little bit of background, Skye Strategies is a local firm that helps primarily nonprofits and educational institutions diversify their funding through securing grant funds. And then we help manage those and evaluate how effective they are and keep raising money through grants. I'm the COO, and Jeremy Burrows is also here today. If you want to introduce yourself, Jeremy.
Yeah, hey, sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Hey, yeah, I'm Jeremy Burrows. I'm the Director of Production and Training at Skye Strategies. I have about 4 years of grant writing and fundraising experience and about 2 years of education experience teaching in the classroom for that. So yeah, it's excited to be here today.
Yeah, cool, thanks. So my background is in both marketing and fundraising in for-profit, but primarily nonprofit settings, as well as nonprofit management, having been the CEO of a local nonprofit organization for many years before coming to Skye Strategies. So when we're talking today, I have appreciation from being on all sides of the table. So what we really want to talk about is just the board's role in fundraising. We know that can be it can be a great opportunity. It can also be a challenge. So just to talk through some things that are best practice, so that when you guys either are soliciting new board members, or if you want to make some changes on your board, you have a bag of resources to be able to say, hey, this is what's expected, not just I'm coming up on the top of my head, wanting my board members to do this, but this is pretty typical across the board. So today we're going to talk about the board as fundraisers. We're going to go over a give or get policy, which I know can be a hot topic for a lot of organizations and gets tossed around a lot. So we'll talk through that and some different ways you can go about that. We'll talk about workplace giving, family foundations, and civic organizations. To let you guys know, the format today is going to be a brief presentation, about 20-30 minutes, and then the last part we're going to take questions. So if you want to use the Q&A feature on this webinar, just as you think of things, as I say things, just go ahead and submit those questions. And then at the end, we'll get to as many of them as we can. All right. The board members as fundraisers. So there's a couple of different roles. And take this information. If you don't have board job descriptions, then I highly encourage you to go ahead and craft those, because people can't comply with things if they don't know what's expected of them. So it really helps set those expectations, and it can also be a really good recruitment tool. So, three kind of main roles: leadership, financial support, and then the connections. So under leadership, not every board member would serve on a fundraising committee, but there should be a fundraising committee. And the fundraising committee could be part of a financial committee, or it could be its own entity, but you definitely need a cohort of board members who are really going to be focused on fundraising, and how that ties back into the overall budget. You may have some folks that have a passion for that. They've done it before. You may have people who just are kind of interested, but really as you're going and meeting with potential board members, or if you don't have this committee already and you're talking to your executive committee about starting it, try your best to have some enthusiasm about it, because I know a lot of board members, when they hear, they think, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to ask people for money, and people will shy away from that. But there's ways to make it exciting for people, and there's ways to make it easier on your board members as well, and less intimidating. Because what you want is board member buy-in, so that when you create these policies, when you set these expectations, that you have enough of those board members, especially hopefully in some of the leadership roles on the executive committee, who are throwing their weight behind it. Because I know it can be very awkward for an executive director who basically sits down at a table of board members who are, I mean, not really your boss, but you know what I mean? Like, you answer to these people as far as the oversight of the organization. It's hard to say, you haven't given yet, where's your check? I mean, that's a really uncomfortable conversation. So if you can get leadership behind you on the board where they're making that push, that is the ideal situation. And I know whenever we do these workshops in person, we can kind of bounce ideas off of people. So it's a little bit difficult in this setting, because I can't see really a show of hands very well on who already has these committees or not. But just think about that. If you don't have that committee, you really need it. And you might start small. Then the second, the second is the financial support. This is an expectation, once again, that needs to be in a board of directors job description, so people know that that isn't buying tickets to your big gala or whatever. That's not financial support. You want them to buy those tickets, and you want them to bring friends to buy those tickets, but you need them to actually make a donation. And then also on the connection side, you have really advocacy, and that takes some education on your part, so that they can be great advocates when they go out and speak about what it is that you do in your mission, and the difference it makes in the community. But then also just securing gifts. So I'm trying to think about some examples for the securing the gift. When you say that to someone who doesn't want to ask for money and is uncomfortable with that, they kind of just hope you don't mention it again. And I don't know if you guys have experienced that, but that's kind of what we see a lot. But that can take a couple of different forms. And so when we go into some of the later slides about civic organizations and family foundations and corporate gifts, we can talk about what that looks like to secure gifts. So yeah. All right, so the give or get policy. I don't know how many of you guys have this. Some people love it, some people hate it, and it's kind of all over in the middle. But it is increasingly important. So I'll just go ahead. What it is that to serve on a board, the board members know that there's an expectation that they will either give themselves a certain amount of money, or they will get it from another source. What does that look like? Well, that's very, very individualized to the organization, and it's very dependent on your budget. I don't know how many of you guys have annual funds, but you may want to go ahead and look at, like, well, what is our goal to raise from individual gifts? And I'm just round numbers. So it's $20,000 a year. A good starting point is 10% needs to come from the board. There is a national push to get that to 25 board giving. And this has been a weird year, and you know, I don't know that that national push is going to get that far, but I think you have to at least start at the 10%. Now, this could mean for some of you guys that have really small boards, because you could have a really large budget and still have a really small board. You may want to look at that. You may want to ask your board if you guys need to take a look at your bylaws. If you're only allowed 4 or 5 board members, does it make sense to bump that to 8? I don't know. You may be rocking and rolling and getting everything done with that small number, and you may not want to change that composition. So those are the conversations you're going to have. But let's say you do have a pretty large budget, and you know, you're raising, you know, 50 or 75,000 in individual donations per year. Well, if you only have 4 board members, that 10%, I mean, unless they just have that capacity, could be challenging, especially if they're trying to give it themselves. So I think it's a very individual decision per organization on what that looks like. And you really, you know, need to get with your finance person, and you need to run some numbers. And so that whenever you go, if you don't have this policy, or if you have a loose policy and there's no actual goal or amount, but you need to change that to make sure that people are actually doing it and know that expectation before coming onto the board, I think you've got to make sure that it's going to be reasonable. So get with your finance director to look at those things. It could be that you don't have an annual fund at all. Some donors come in and they trickle in, but you don't have a concerted effort. And this could be a really good segue into, hey, we've been talking about launching this for years. A good way to launch it would be to say, hey, this is our, you know, inaugural annual fund push. Our goal is XYZ. Our board has kicked it off by giving whatever percentage, and that's a really good way to kick off something like that. So that's what it is. Why have it? Well, basically, from a funder's outside funder's standpoint, if the board of directors doesn't believe in the mission of the organization enough to actually give, then it starts at, you know, building questions of, well, then why are we giving? You know, we're located in Cincinnati and they can't even get their local board to give. And we, as grant writers, see this question all the time. You know, it kind of has been evolving over the years, where at one point it was, do you have board giving? And you could answer yes if one person gave. But over the years, it's getting increasingly specific, wanting to know. Some funders will ask what percentage of your board gives. So if you say, you know, I have 10 members and only 1 or 2 gives, I mean, that doesn't look very appealing to a funder. Some funders now are asking, how much total does your board give in gifts? So that's a question. So if you have this budget and you see that the board members are only giving $1,500 combined a year, that could send a message as well. So all of these things should be conversations around the room with players, to just make sure that you talk it out. And that way, when you have some of these, some of the rationale behind it, it doesn't come across as the executive director or the CEO is asking for more money. You know, they should be able to raise it this way or that way. You know, it takes sort of that weight off of your shoulders to be like, it's bigger than me just wanting to raise money and needing money for the organization. This has broader implications for our ability to fundraise and to be competitive for grant funding. So, and it's kind of a standard when you go on a board that you should be expected that that's going to be in one of your top 3 giving focus. So, I mean, in some people will have 3-year terms on a board. Some people are just 1, whatever that looks like. But when you are courting these new board members, especially if you haven't had those conversations in the past, go ahead, build that job description out and start having those conversations now, so that at least this new crop of board members has that expectation from the get-go. And then it isn't an awkward conversation, because, hey, they knew this, we had coffee, we talked through the job description, they knew this was a responsibility, they agreed to it, didn't have a problem with it. It's just a given. And then the how does it function? So it could be a couple of different things. You could have an actual policy in place that's part of, I mean, you wouldn't need to be added to bylaws or anything like that, but you could, have the board and the executive committee go ahead and vote on it, and it's a policy, and roll it into place. And have it just really, really, what am I trying to say? It's not really interface, but it's an actual policy, something you can fall back on, something you can say, remember, here's the policy, and you just hit it maybe at your first board meeting and get someone, maybe the finance chair or somebody like that, treasurer, to go ahead and kick it off, and it's a done deal. Some people like it to be a little more loose. And I think you just have to really kind of think about, well, what kind of individuals do I typically recruit for my board? What are their personalities like? What would work with their style? So really, once again, it's very individualized. But I definitely think the upfront thing makes sense. And I do think also that you need to have either your finance committee, possibly, but definitely your executive committee on board before this is rolled out to everybody, if you don't already have this, or if you have it, but people aren't following it, or there's no real goal, no real amount attached to it, I would suggest bringing that up to executive committee. We need to get really intentional about this, because it gets mentioned and people brush it off, and then by the end of the year, 3 people given. So get the executive board behind you so that they are the ones doing that push. All right, next slide. So another way board members can play a really big role in fundraising is workplace giving connections. So I think that is also a conversation to have right up, when you're recruiting folks, or now, like if you don't tap into that, go ahead and put that as an agenda item on the first meeting of the year. Hey, we're going to look at a couple of different avenues for all of you guys, just to make sure we're not missing anything. And ask, do your employers have a matching gift program? I think locally, most people know Unum is famous for a really good matching gift program. And make sure you're tapping into that. So let's say you have a $500 give or get policy. Well, if they have workplace giving, now, if they want to give the full 500 and get that match, that would be great. But let's say that someone that doesn't have that capacity to do that, you could still get a good quality board member with lots of valuable skills. They're only going to give $250, but their workplace is going to match to get to the 500. So being able to help, get to that level will kind of ease people who might be on the fence, be like, oh, I don't really know if I have the capacity to do that. Go through some of these scenarios so that they don't feel like, oh, maybe I couldn't do this. Volunteer support programs. So right now we're talking about fundraising, as far as dollars and cents, but a lot of workplaces will have volunteer programs in place. And so maybe those individuals aren't donors before they volunteer, but you have an opportunity for them to connect with your mission and with those whom you serve. And then once they're there, you have a way to collect that information and roll them into your annual fund. So that can actually turn into individual donors, possibly major gifts, depending on who they are. And then some corporations will have donation through payroll deduction, and that's very nice. So let's say you have a larger give or get policy. Let's say it's 1,500, even 1,000, and individuals don't want to just chunk that out right at one time, they could have the opportunity. But a lot, to pay a little bit every month and it just comes straight to you. They don't see it. It's done by their HR. And oftentimes people may not know that this is an option, especially people who've worked somewhere for a really long time. They may not think about it. And then through annual giving campaigns, some of the most noted ones are CFC campaigns for the combined federal campaign for federal employees. If you happen to be an organization that's slated for that, then they can give straight to your organization. And there is an application process to become a part of that. If you don't take part in it now, you might want to look into it and see if it's a fit for your organization, especially if you tend to get board members or volunteers or folks who work in that capacity, because that could be a really good way, in addition to annual fund, to solicit gifts. So family foundation connections. This is one that folks, it gets overlooked. So time and again, we'll go to write an application for a family foundation, and we'll say, you really need to connect and talk with so-and-so, because it could be that it's open to the public, that we know that if you pass the idea through somebody and they're like, yes, we can get really excited about this, we know it's a need of the community, then we can feel really good about moving forward writing the application for that idea. Or it could be it's an invitation only opportunity, so you have to get in front of someone to let them know what you do to even get an invitation to apply. And time and again, people are like that they don't source their board for things like this. It doesn't even occur to them. And especially people that have lived, they're from Chattanooga and have lived here their whole lives. You never know who went to school with somebody, who goes to church with somebody. It's uncanny once you really ask the question. And board members typically don't organically ever think to even offer this up. So this is often missed, we find. Family Foundation connections. Down at the bottom, we give some examples of some of our local ones. Lyndhurst Foundation, Ben Wood, Weldon F. Osborne, Lillian Colby, and they all have trustees that help make the funding decisions. So what we always ask people to do is, hey, let's give you a list of these trustees and circulate them make it an agenda item. Or if you have that fundraising committee, maybe start there, because maybe these people that want to serve on that committee are used to this kind of thing. And then, maybe they need to get with other board members. So maybe it's not a board meeting, maybe it's an ad hoc meeting, whatever structure works best for you guys, but actually looking at those lists. Who knows anybody here? And make it clear that you're not asking that board member to go ask that person for money. You're not even asking that board member to necessarily make a pitch. Some people love that and they want to do that. You just need an invitation. You just need an introduction. So, somebody's like, oh yes, I know Catherine Colby. I'd be happy to introduce you, and whatever format, that seems to fit. If it's an email, if it's, virtual, whatever. And that will give you a little bit of weight to be able to actually probably more likely to get in front of those individuals when you have that sort of introduction. It talks about using the 990. There is a resource called GuideStar, and that's free. So you just have to make an account, and you can go and see 990s. They're usually about a year behind of the actual year for filing, sometimes two, but they'll have 990s on there for all the different foundations and nonprofits. You guys that have to file 990s, they're on there too. So, but you can see trustee names. Oftentimes they may or may not list them on their website, so you really have to go to the 990 to get that information. Also, it will show who they've given what. And some foundations will also list that, the past awardees from the past 2 years. But that can help you see if you're in alignment with who they've been funding, what kind of organizations they've been funding, and what amounts, because those amounts are on there. So you can take a look and say, like, do your homework. So you get that invitation, you can go and say, oh, well, I know they've been giving XYZ, 10,000 a year, and we do something similar. So I'm not going to go in and pitch 30,000, but I might pitch 10 and hope that I get, at least 5, something like that. So it can help you make a plan of action. And I'm trying to think, I think that's pretty much it with the Family Foundation, but definitely figure out a way to source that, because if you just email out a list, you're likely not to get anything back. Civic organizations, very similar, but ask, are you involved with anything? So when you're soliciting new board members, or even you may not even know about the ones you have on your board right now, are you in Rotary? Are you, a Kiwanis? Many churches have small community giving campaigns. We do apply to churches for people all the time. You're talking about usually 5,000 and under, 2,500 range a lot of times, but still, that's nothing to sneeze at. So make sure that if people are connected. Now, you could be like with the civic clubs, they're always looking for speakers. So it could be that your first order of business is to say, hey, can you think that people would be interested in me coming and doing a presentation about what we're doing in the community? And that could be like your first foot in the door, and then you get to meet and greet with everybody there. And then, they happen to have this, grant application process for, their fundraisers, and they want to give back to the community. Oh, I think we align with it. Well, now they've met you. So maybe whomever's in that committee would be more inclined to say, yeah, I think we ought to consider them this year. So, but having that introduction made by your board member is going to lend a lot of weight. Let's see. I know we're closing in on the time for the 30 minutes, but I think that's it. Jeremy, anything else that you want to add that I've left out?
No, I don't think so. There are a couple questions maybe that we could get to now if you want to start asking questions as well. Let me see. Rebecca Cheney asked about if there's any more detailed instructions on how to apply to become a recipient of annual giving campaigns. And I want to say specifically on that, if you are interested in joining the CFC campaign, the Combined Federal Campaign, I'm pasting that link in the chat. And that is usually early January, February, usually when that deadline is to apply. It's not a super complicated application, but
there is a registration fee depending on the size of your budget, or okay.
Yeah, and that fee has been changing every year. And Connie, do you remember what it is now? What it's up to?
No, it got up there for some people, so our folks have bowed out a little bit. But I definitely think it's something everyone should look into. Mm-hmm. And that way, all of those kinds of things, like Jeremy said, they change.
Yeah.
So keep your eye on it. And if it's not a good idea right now or not financially feasible right now, that doesn't mean it won't be in the future. But so when you have that fundraising committee, that's a good thing to talk about. Hey, I looked into this. The fee is $350 for our budget size. Does it make sense? Do we think we'll make the 350 back? Plus, do we want to try it? I mean, that you want some weight with your fundraising committee to say, let's try it. Who knows? They may say, hey, well, heck, we can each give $100. We can pay for that. Let's try it and see what happens. So at least they know that you're looking to continuously diversify your funding sources. And if it's not a fit, it's not a fit, and that's fine. But at least you investigated it.
And James just said that they paid $750 at his last job and got about $7,000 back. So
okay, yep.
Yeah.
So let me, for those of you who've never participated in that, now COVID has changed things this year. So yeah. I hate that for whatever happened this year. But they typically do events where you get to go. You're assigned a number So, Arts Build is number 1, 2, 3, and you go to these events at the post office, at different TVA sites, whatever it looks like, the police departments, and you get to speak with the employees directly and talk about your programming, make sure that they know what your number is, so that when they go to designate their gift, they can designate it directly to the organizations. So it's really a networking opportunity. So if you don't have the capacity to attend the events, that can be it. Then, maybe it's not for you. But if you have great volunteers who love to do that kind of thing, maybe it is. So just to let you know what that format looks like.
I don't think there's any other unanswered questions right now. So if you all do have questions, please submit them either through the chat box or the Q&A.
And so you can see here that our contact information, it's just our first names at skyestrategies.com. Website is skyestrategies.com. So if you forget, you can look us up there. We have the staff listing as well.
Hey, I had earlier in the chat, someone asked about when you really want to have community members or clients as part of your board. How do you work to have them be able to give of time or time, talent, treasure? Like, what are some of those other options if you want to have a really inclusive board?
There are samples online, like if you want to Google around basically of what a give or get policy could look like. And that's why I said it's so individualized, because every board is different. So if you do, especially if you have service recipients on your board, which is a huge trend, and funders like to see that. There can be allowances, but you also don't want to make anyone feel like that's the scholarship bucket. So you can find a way to word that. You can find some people have service recipients and community members kind of serve on an advisory council. It may not be the full board. They may only have voting privileges for certain things. I mean, I don't know how these different boards are structured, but you could structure it a little bit differently to where that expectation isn't the same for that advisory board or ad hoc committee or whatever that looks like. But you could still give them voting rights for certain things. Does that make sense?
And I know here at Artsville, we just ask give something. So some board members may give less than $100. Some may give $10,000. But it's just a way that we encourage giving of something so that we can say that 100% of our board is contributing to the organization. Sure.
And that's where, let's say you set a goal, like a 10% goal, it may look differently for everybody, but you have 2 or 3 people on there, like you said, that they can give $5,000 tomorrow, and that's not going to affect them at all. And then there's others that, $25 is a very meaningful gift, and that's fine. We kind of touched on annual funds, and we find when we work with people, it's really all over the place. Either people have a robust annual fund and it goes out like clockwork, and they can expect to get X amount of dollars from it every year, and every few years they bump it up a little bit, a percentage for a goal, or get a challenge grant with a match, to increase it. And then there's people who really don't do anything, and then everyone in the middle. If you're doing an annual fund or you're wanting to initiate it, maybe asking your board members, hey, can you give me 5 to 10 names, like real names? And would you be willing to write, you're going to have your solicitation piece, but can you write a handwritten note on it? We're kicking this off. I hope to see you participate this year, things like that. Those are also things that board members can do, and maybe bring some friends along that normally would have thrown the thing in the mail, in the trash. So, or that you not read the email if it hadn't come from the person that they knew. But then that can add up over time because maybe they're a $50 donor this year, but in 5 years they're $1,000. You never know.
There are no unanswered questions right now, it looks like.
Okay.
Just a reminder for everybody that we will be sharing this presentation on our YouTube page later today. Okay, well, I think that's a good place to end there. So everybody sees Connie and Jeremy's contact information. We're happy to make introductions if need be. But thanks everybody for joining us. We've had a great crowd today and some really great questions. And so with that, we will end our first shared services